Consult an advisor or conduct your own due diligence when making financial decisions. General principles discussed during this program do not constitute personal advice. This program is furnished by Dentist Advisors, a registered investment advisor. This is Dentist Money. Now, here's your host, Reese Harper.
Welcome to the Dentist Money blog on DentalEconomics.com, where we help dentists make smart financial decisions. I'm your host, Reese Harper, here with my co-host, Sir Ryan Isaac.
Good day, Mr. Harper.
I didn't know if you knew that you had that.
Yeah, it's not on my business card or my email signature. It's too long.
Well, good day to you, son. I want you to share a story with me today that is about everyone's favorite exercise activity.
Yeah, running story.
Running.
Yeah, we're going to talk some running today. I think we probably have some runners listening out there, I'm sure.
All right, so tell me the story that you got.
You've probably heard of it. There's this race in Australia. It's an ultramarathon called the Sydney to Melbourne. It's 544 miles long. It takes 5 or 6 days to finish. So there's this story where this race happened in 1983. There's this 61-year-old local potato farmer. I didn't know, by the way, that Australia was big on potatoes.
Shout out to you potato farmers out in Idaho.
Okay. So 61-year-old potato farmer, his name's Cliff Young. He shows up to compete against all these, the other racers are world-class athletes. They're there in their running gear. They got sponsors' logos, and he literally shows up wearing overalls and galoshes.
For those of you who don't know what galoshes are, they are rubber boots.
Rubber boots, not meant for running.
Did he really have those? Because that's what I've seen in the... Why would you run in rubber boots? That's like the worst thing to run in, but he didn't
know.
All right.
Cliff didn't know, okay?
So anyway, what does he do?
The race starts. All the runners get way ahead of him, of course. He's in galoshes, and he's 61-year-old Cliff. He's not running either. He's doing this shuffle. Like his feet are just shuffling back and forth, constant and steady.
Kind of kicking a rock and, and kind of finding something to kick.
He's moving rocks in front of him, the whole time. But so normally the strategy for the runners, though, is they run about 18 hours as best they can, and then they sleep for 4 to 6 hours. But Cliff didn't really feel like he needed to sleep, though. So while everyone else slept, he just kept shuffling down the road. The reason why he's doing this, he actually grew up on a farm where his family, they weren't able to afford any horses or four-wheelers. Of course, back then it's probably three-wheelers.
And three-legged horses.
Right. So they ran sheep, and so they couldn't afford those things. So whenever the storms rolled in, he'd have to get like 2,000 head of sheep all rounded up on foot. And so sometimes he'd have to run those sheep for 2 or 3 days straight without sleeping. So he said he was, as he was running the race, he would kind of just keep in mind that storms rolling in, and he'd motivate himself by thinking he's got this head of sheep. So anyway, over the course of 5 days, he only allows himself like 12 hours of sleep. And he basically only stopped for food and bathroom, okay? So as a result, what happened, though, is he won the race, he set a new course record, and he beat the second-place finisher by like 10 hours.
No way.
Yeah, Cliff Young.
Cliff Young for the win.
Shuffle for the win.
It's a pretty cool story. So you're saying that the advice today on the podcast is to work and never sleep. Keep working and never sleep. That's the only way to get ahead.
Yeah. No, that's it. So that's perfect. We'll end it there. Thanks for listening today, everybody. This has been the Dentist Money Show, where we help dentists make smart financial decisions.
Okay, backing up. Maybe there's another lesson you had in mind. So let's go ahead and set the premise here for the real lesson.
Yeah, funny you mentioned that. There was actually
a point to your story.
Yeah. So there's probably several morals to this story. It could be maybe that there's a lot of ways to get something accomplished. It could be that you shouldn't judge someone by their appearance. But what we'll talk about today is that the story of benchmarking.
Okay, so this is a story about benchmarking.
Yeah, it's about measuring performance and how when you know something is possible, it becomes more attainable. And so when Cliff blew through this course record and he beat everyone like he did, what do you think happened after that?
Probably everybody that's racing realized they had to run that race without sleeping.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and a lot of them, they even started doing the Cliff Young shuffle to conserve energy.
Oh, Cliff Shuffle.
So you're going to start doing that around the office
now. The Cliff Shuffle.
Conserve your energy.
Take off my shoes, run the Cliff Shuffle.
Yeah, all of a sudden they had this new standard to meet, which was proven to be attainable by old Cliff.
Okay.
And the result was that they took a new approach to the race, and they got faster the next year. So without Cliff, they would have all just kept doing the same thing, run for 18 hours and then sleeping for 4 or 6,
Yeah. So, and the thing, I think this is something where I'm kind of passionate about, that the average retirement age of a dentist is age 67 right now, according to the ADA study.
Yeah.
12,000 people surveyed, average dentist retiring at 67, the average U.S. citizen retiring at 62.
Little disparity.
And that same disparity has been there for decades. I mean, it's not like a recent phenomenon, so people are it's the same thing's going to keep happening and happening until you change.
Until someone proves it otherwise.
Someone's got to prove otherwise, right? And so it's like, I don't know, the 4 minute mile, you remember that?
Same concept.
Roger Bannister.
It was Bannister,
Yeah,
actually.
of course.
I don't have that. I haven't memorized. It's not written in front of me.
Yeah.
Roger Bannister.
Well, that guy was like a legend.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I remember also there was a Fosbury flop. Do you know what that is? The Fosbury flop is a high jump technique.
Oh.
So when I was
That
younger.
sounds like what I do when I jump off anything
When I was
high.
young and I did it the old school way.
Yeah.
We were diving over the high jump face first.
Okay.
That's really alive. Never been able to jump over a high jump bar.
Are you talking about like in track?
In the Olympic high jump.
The high jump.
The most important
Okay.
event of the Olympic Games.
The crowning jewel.
They're
of the
running.
Olympics.
They used to jump over and it rubbed their
Yeah.
stomach. Just kind of a gentle rub.
Yeah.
Going over, and now
Just the kind you want.
they run and they flip over backwards, kind of do a little convulsion and kick up their feet at the end.
Same thing. But
Fosbury flop. No one was doing that before till Foz did it. And now they're jumping almost foot higher than they used to be able to.
Okay, so the
or
principle
more.
is like when you see somebody doing something else, it's kind of like it's like a wake up call.
Yeah.
So let's use this concept then. We'll talk about how benchmarking can be used to attain your financial goals and outperform your current trajectory.
Sounds good. Let's nail it.
Okay. So we use the same principle, right, to help dentists that we work with. We're able to take all the data and financial data that we get from our clients, and we use it to establish like a low, a mid, and a high range for various metrics that we're measuring. So when one of our dentists gets a financial report, he can see how his performance compares to a few things like his peers.
Yeah, and the underlying principle is that the performance is going to improve just by being compared to other people. As you saw with Cliff Young for the win,
Cliff,
the
and
Foz
Fosbury, the flop,
and
Bannister.
so one thing I've noticed that in some ways it introduces like an element of competition that motivates each client to perform better. It's not like we're sending out like a monthly report that says Dr. So-and-so is ranked number 1 and
we're
he's
naming
worth this
everybody
much.
and
It's a transparent measurement that people can look at and see that their performance may not be measuring up to the numbers being produced by other people, and it gives people a wake up call, like you mentioned. It's kind of a wake up call.
Great. So let's get a little technical now. Let's talk about making the numbers in your life actually useful, not just numbers. But
I get this. I talk about a lot of this in my presentation at dental events, and there's all these different numbers that can be used to describe a dentist's finances. You have your collections, your overhead, your profitability, your tax rate, loan balances, practice loans, your personal income, your retirement plan balances, your mortgage. There's a ton of numbers you can look at. But numbers by themselves don't mean anything. Like if I told you that dentist collections were at $750,000, is that good or bad? Should he be happy about that?
It depends.
On what?
Oh, a lot of things. Like
what?
What were his expenses?
Okay.
Or how does it compare with collections from the previous year? Or how do collections compare to other dentists in similar situations?
Yeah, so in order to make that $750,000 of collections number useful, you got to bring in another number, and there's a few ways to do this.
Yeah, right. So one way is you can compare a number to itself just over time.
Mm-hmm. So you take your collections, see how it looks at different time periods. So, for example, if you collected $750,000 in 2015. And then you take $900,000 in collections of 2016 that you got, right? You collected $900 one year and $750 the next. You can compare your collections from different years.
Context.
And you can see that you improved by $150,000 or 20%. It doesn't tell the whole story, but at least it gives you some sense for how you're trending, right?
Yeah, right. It's kind of like when a runner times himself to gauge his own personal improvement over time. So if you don't have the stopwatch, though, you'd get to the end of the mile on any given day and be like, that felt pretty good.
Yes,
or a good run.
Or the front jump on the high jump, the Fosbury or the
gentle rub, like you
said. Like it used to rub, doesn't
a gentle rub.
So when he times himself, he's got some kind of objective measurement, right, to use, or measures anything you measure. It's subjective. It gets you oriented, lets you know where you stand.
Yeah. So then the next way you could do it is you can compare a number to a different kind of number.
Yeah, and this is much more useful than the first way. You take one number like your income, okay, and you divide it by another number like collections. In this case, you'll end up with profitability, right, or your profitability ratio.
Income divided by collections and your profitability. Okay.
Yeah, that's a more important number than your income alone because it tells you to a greater extent how well you're managing your business.
Okay.
And then there's one other way that's important.
The third
right?
way you can do it is you can compare your numbers to somebody else's numbers.
Yeah, and more specifically, compare your ratios, okay, to someone else's ratios. What I mean by that is rather than saying I collected $1.5 million and he collected $1 million, I must be doing pretty good. You want to use ratios like your profit, right, to make the comparison. So you take your numbers, you turn them into ratios, and that puts everything on an even playing field, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, maybe you did a 1.5 and your buddy did $1 million, but by the time you took out your expenses and you both took home the same $250,000, right? And if we use those numbers, you had a profit margin of 17% and he had a profit margin of 25%, but you had more collections. So now you have this level playing field that you're talking about.
Yeah, and both of you in that example that you just gave would actually not be making that much profit.
If you made it,
So if we compared that to your peers, we'd be like, you both are doing bad, but one is doing worse.
Yeah,
okay?
So it's helpful.
So that's the number you want to compare those, that margin. So that's where you want to start.
Yeah. So then the next question would be, how can our dentists who are listening implement this philosophy? Should they start calling their buddies and asking what their profit margins look like?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you feel close enough to them, lots of your
call.
friends are talking about this kind of stuff anyway. But it's probably easier to talk to your CPA or a financial advisor who works with other dentists and say, like, how does this number compare to another number of a typical dentist, or how does this ratio compare to the ratio of another dentist? But let's talk about some actual ratios that aren't just profit margin. That's the easiest one to think of, and everyone's familiar with that. But the ones we look at are much more related to someone's wealth. Okay, and that's where we've kind of innovated, and we feel like we have some ratios that are important, right?
Yeah. So we love our listeners.
Yeah.
Of course, we wanna give them some good examples here. So let's give them an example of a ratio that we use to track some performance.
Cool.
So, and if you're listening, you can make your own calculations, and then you can compare them to these ratios when you get a chance.
Yeah, let's start with a super simple one, okay? We call it your liquid term. And every January, we benchmark this statistic for our clients. It basically measures the number of years that you could live on everything that's liquid, okay? Your bank accounts, personal and practice, and any investments that you have that are not inside of a retirement plan. So stuff you can get at really quickly.
Okay.
It's usually always going to be an investment of some kind that's not in a retirement plan, or your cash, or a liquid, security.
Let me ask you a question. We get when we talk about liquidity and retirement plan. When you say retirement plan, most people think of only IRAs and 401ks and simple IRAs.
Yes.
Right? You can have a retirement plan that's outside of that. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, totally. Like a lot of people's money for retirement isn't inside of a 401k or an IRA, right?
It's still invested.
They're investing
Still
it
growing.
in an account that's growing, but it's not in a 401k
It's not
or an
a
IRA.
pre-tax.
That's what we're looking at when we call liquid term.
Okay.
Because stuff in your 401k is not liquid. So it's not,
Because you're penalized.
if you take it
before
out.
you're 60.
So we don't consider from our perspective, it's not easily accessed without a penalty.
Right. Okay.
So you got your cash, you add up your cash, and you add up all your investments that are not in your 401k or IRA, and you divide that by your spending. Okay? You divide that by what you spend in one calendar year. So add up all your numbers, divide it by your annual spending. If you're 40 years old and your liquid term's only a 1, okay? Let's say your total dollar amount is $250,000, but you spend, $250,000.
Then you're at a 1.
You're at a
you
1.
could live for 1 year on your liquid investments.
Now, if you're a 1 and you're 40, that's really not liquid enough. Okay, you haven't developed good habits to restrain yourself from purchasing or investing or growing your practice obsessively, or you've got to build some liquidity. Got to have some more balance.
Okay.
Well, if you're above a 10 and you're 40, you're doing pretty awesome, and that was our high statistic for this group.
Yep.
But if you're at a 3 or a 4, you're probably doing just fine, coming in right around the average. So, just like liquid term, there's 12 ratios that we track. Liquid term is one of the 12, and we call these elements. And at the end of the day, did you just trademark that?
I did.
It's
That's a
already
verbal
trademarked.
TM. Elements
at the
TM.
end of the day, they're meant to help you improve your primary ratio.
The most important, the mother of
the
all
mother
ratios.
of all ratios, which we call your total term.
Can we, producer, can we get some music right after he says that says, like, dun, dun, dun?
The total term.
Okay.
This is the number that tells you how close you are to retirement. Okay.
Yeah, right. And you can calculate this total term by a few steps. First, you got to take all of your assets. So things like your cash, your investments, your real estate, the value of your practice.
Not things like those exact
Those
things.
are the exact things. Let me rephrase that. You take your cash, investments, real estate, and practice value,
Okay.
then subtract your total debts. Your student loans, your
Yep.
practice loans, your personal debts.
Yeah.
That gives you something called a net worth.
Yep.
That's what you're worth. Money, not intrinsically
Yes.
as a person. Okay.
No, you're a good person, even if it's negative. Okay.
It's your net worth. You take that net worth and you divide that by your annual spending. That gives you your total term number.
Okay.
And so this ratio, what it does is it tells you approximately how many years you could live on your current assets if they didn't grow, if you just retired right now.
Yeah.
So, for example, if your net worth is $1 million and you spend $100,000 annually, that's personal spending at home, then your current wealth can support you for about 10 years.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, by the time, well, actually, you didn't cover this.
It's
let's
important
give
to
them a range.
What's the context then? Compare a number to a number.
You want your total term to be around a 30
That's the magic number.
when you're ready to retire. Now, I would say if you have a lot of equity in your primary residence, like a lot of your
So if you hit a 30, but a chunk of it's in your
big chunk is
house.
in your house, and you'll know that because one of the other elements is called an RT, which is your real estate term.
You'll know this clearly.
Yeah, your total term it needs to that will support you through retirement. It's a good gauge. Okay, if you're at a 20, you're probably barely getting ready for retirement. 30's secure, and 40 would be like you're crushing it. You're doing awesome. So we want to make sure that your total term really is close to a 30, at least a 20 before you start thinking about retirement.
Yeah, and we've got a really comprehensive guide. We just published an e-guide. It's called The Only Number You Need to Calculate Your Retirement.
Oh yeah.
That didn't sound very smooth the way I said it. The only one number you need to calculate your retirement.
Yeah.
This e-guide that we just published, it'll explain this concept of total term in a lot more detail and give you some benchmarks and some ranges on where you might want to be and what
It'll show you how to
for.
calculate it, and you won't have to remember all this. Just go to dentistadvisors.com/sign up.
Yep, and we'll get it to you right away. That's dentistadvisors.com/sign up for that total term e-guide.
Yeah.
So go get it. Closing thoughts, Reese?
Well,
Anything you wanna
here's what I
finish
want to
with?
kind of conclude. You need to compare your performance to reality, okay? Not your perception, all right? Don't just look at your dental school buddy's practice and say, man, he's in a prime location. He's got an amazing building. He's got flat screens all over his office, a giant fish tank with cool, like,
the screen
tropical.
in back of the fish tank.
He's got state-of-the-art equipment, a bunch of associates. He's killing it, okay? That's all perception.
Yeah.
Now, don't reach conclusions about someone else's financial health based on how you feel or what you think is happening. You've got to base it on what's real. And that's why we benchmark. It's the right kind of motivation,
Right.
Because it motivates you to actually pursue things that stretch you a little bit, but that don't make you feel guilty about you not being in the right place or not being growing fast enough. I really think it's important to benchmark in order to get the right motivation.
And it's based on data-driven, factual context, not the thing your friend says that's happening that makes you feel like insecure. Maybe I'm not doing this as well or something like that. Okay, so give me an example then of what you're talking about. Have you ever seen a benchmark work like this that motivated someone?
Totally. Like back in 2009, I remember telling a client,
2009.
that was a dark
2009.
day. I remember showing a client that he should be saving over 25% or right at 25% of his gross income based on where he was at with collections. Okay, that was his kind of benchmark metric. That was the median for where he was really at.
Okay.
And I remember him looking at me like, "Are you crazy? Like I
that's a lot of money.
can't save that much money." But the thing was that was crazy was once I started showing him some benchmark comparisons, and we started putting numbers in front of him so he saw like what was real.
Yeah.
He started accumulating more and more. And this year his savings rate was over 30%. And when we met, he was just saving less than 10%. So I've seen that person go from 10% savings rate to over 30%. And it's all because of having real, like, measurable, calculatable data that he knew was real. Like it wasn't just a national average or some
Wasn't a rumor.
guess. It wasn't a rumor, but benchmarking matters and it works, especially if you're comparing to the right data points.
So he pretty much saw the financial version of Cliff do the shuffle,
Yes.
and it worked.
And-
It changed his behavior.
War galoshes.
Okay. Use the numbers. That's the moral of the story. They hold you accountable. They push you to improve. And most importantly, the numbers don't lie.
Ever.
They
Felt
never
like
lie.
a song you were about to go into, but
I was thinking about it. That was another episode where you actually sang some David Bowie. Okay, so the other lesson from today is if you're 61 and you're thinking of running a marathon, do it. Throw on your boots, get out there and shock the world, with your farmer shuffle.
okay.
So just that's the other lesson to take away from today. And you know what else is cool about this Cliff Young guy?
What?
This is probably the best part of the story. He didn't know that there was a prize for winning the race. There was a $10,000 prize. And so when they gave it to him, he decided that the other racers needed the money more than he did. So he just split the winnings among the next 5 finishers.
Dude, that's pretty cool. Although it probably didn't improve his ratios that much, did it?
He's a stud.
What a stud.
He's a good guy. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Remember, leave us a review on this podcast. And if you'd like more information, go to dentistadvisors.com. You can sign up for our free newsletter. You can schedule an appointment on our calendar. And we also have a phone number on there. Give us a call anytime. We'd be happy to chat.
Carry on.